All right. Welcome back, everybody, to the Level Up Podcast, where you learn how to go from agent to entrepreneur. And we've got a super fun conversation. I'm really excited to dig into some deep stuff about what's going on in the market right now and how do we really not only survive, but thrive when our margins are shrinking. Not necessarily the total fee that we can collect or charge at the consumer, but what happens when the margins within that commission start to go down. And we're going to get a lot of, general freakouts. So this will be a fun conversation. Let's try to prevent some freakouts. First of all, Greg Harrelson, it's been a while. How are you?
It has, man. I miss you, man. I enjoy these conversations, especially these when it's just you and I.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad that we're reuniting, on this podcast this week, and look forward to debating with you a little bit. And at the end of the day, the audience getting a lot of value.
Well, I was going to say it's hard to play devil's advocate with you sometimes because I feel like your brain you're so far ahead on most things that a lot of times all I can sit back and do is think and then go, yeah, I agree with Greg. So we'll agree to agree. It'll be great.
Yeah. So I don't know if you're saying that I'm really smart or if I'm just a damn good salesman, and I'm a little confused myself. But
I was going to say potato. All right. So what you're seeing out there is not what we probably initially feared, and I've thought about this a lot too, and my personal opinion was that commissions like the total commission that we charge the consumer would start to drop. And you're saying that's actually not where the margins are going to shrink. So why is that?
Yeah. So first of all, we got to think of, like, when we think about margins, let's put it in context here. Like, I'm referring to the profitability per transaction that a real estate agent will experience, as well as the profitability of a transaction that a brokerage or a team may experience. So we're talking about the transaction and how much profit there is. I do believe the margins are going to shrink. Now, where a lot of people have been focusing their attention is that, oh my gosh, commission is going to go down. Like, what we can charge the consumer, what's going to be acceptable to, for a consumer to pay a real estate agent is going to decrease. They would call that commission, compression is what they would call that, right? There's a lot of talk about commission compression. But if we really, real estate agents, and myself included, we have to keep our eyes open and observe what's going on. Because see, if we hear what's going on, we hear commission compression. We hear that real estate agents won't be needed, they'll be replaced. Right. But if we see what's going on and you kind of tune out the noise for a minute and just kind of observe, you'll see that some of these technology companies that are so-called iBuyer programs and buying properties, and they approach property owners and say, hey, we'll buy your property. We can close it in 7 days. You don't have to go through the hassle of showing the property, having unqualified buyers walk in, without notice, and you won't have to pay a real estate commission. We'll take everything care of you and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And now it sounds really good, but then when you look at the actual final HUD sheet on the transactions, you'll see that, yeah, there wasn't a commission, but there was a fee. And there are some companies out there, and I won't mention which companies they are. We kind of all know who they are. They're charging fees as high as 7%, for a fee, a transaction fee. So, they have integrity. They said there's no commission. And there isn't a commission.
Yeah, they're definitely not sending that money out somewhere to an agent. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just because there's no commission doesn't mean that there's, that the seller doesn't have an expense. It just is not labeled as that type of expense, right?
Right. So
the reality is that you've got a seller that would sit there and say, okay, they'll pay that fee. Well, that fee is the same thing as it's kind of like what a real estate agent would charge. It's relatively the same amount, and they seem to have no problem with that. Mm-hmm. See, if there was really going to be, in my opinion, commission compression, then these technology companies would do these transactions, and then they wouldn't have those fees in there, and then the true value or the net that these sellers would get would be more than they could get with a real estate agent. But the net that the seller's getting right now is not necessarily more than the real estate agent can get them. A lot of times it's a lot less, and the real estate agent could have also sold that property in a very quick period of time.
Yeah.
The same one that some of these iBuyer programs, the same properties these iBuyer programs are willing to buy, are the same properties that an agent probably could have put on the market and sold it pretty fast also, right?
Okay.
So like the whole savings of time and the savings of commission, is it like really real? If we look at the HUD statements, the net sheets show often will show that there's really not a savings there. Okay, so I don't know if that really speaks on my commission compression.
Well, yeah, let's set the scene just a little bit. So basically, you're saying that what's not happening is we're not seeing, at least for the competition from big tech companies right now, isn't creating the perception in the public that selling their home is worth less than 6 or 7%. We're not seeing that public perception, and therefore we're not seeing a compression of our commission. We're not going into listing appointments and they're laughing at us if we try to charge 7%, because our competition, even the big tech companies, are effectively charging right now the same thing. So that's kind of setting the scene. So what is really happening if our margins are shrinking, but it's not because sellers aren't willing to pay 6 or 7% to get the house sold? Where is the shrinking margin coming from?
Yeah. So what I believe where the shrinking margin is already starting to bubble up, and it's going to continue. Actually, I predict even in the next 12 months, we'll see a very noticeable increase in what I'm sharing with you here. And that is the number of transactions that an agent is paying a referral fee on today is increasing. So if a person was doing 10 transactions or 50 transactions, we'll just take somebody doing 30 transactions. If you were doing 30 transactions 3 years ago, you may have done 27 transactions where you actually never had to pay a referral fee, and then 3 transactions come with a referral fee. Maybe another agent across town. Maybe you were dealing with, one of these home lights or something like that, and you had to pay a referral fee. Well, now what's happening is that same person that was doing 30 transactions, out of their same 30 transactions, or let's say they're increased to 40 transactions now, there's 40 transactions. Now they're probably paying 8 or 9 of those transactions are coming at a referral fee. So if you look at the ratio of number of transactions done to number of transactions done with a referral fee, and you created a ratio, that ratio is already starting to creep up, and it's going to continue to creep up. Now, we could say, well, Greg, you sure are damn making a lot of predictions. Well, all you got to do is follow the money. Like, see, all these technology companies are putting in millions and millions of dollars to generate the leads to actually refer to the real estate agent. So you as a real estate agent, you might be thinking, well, hey, I'm in good shape. I work centers of influence, and I've got a healthy database of 1,000 people, and that gives me, 50 transactions a year or whatever it does. Well, the challenge is those 1,000 people are being absolutely bombarded by all of these technology companies and marketing companies, and giving them incentives to actually let them be the portal that recommends great agents. So even us that have really nice, tight centers of influence, databases, these companies are penetrating those databases, getting them to sign up. And then even if your centers of influence says, well, no, I've already got an agent that I like, they're going to create scenarios where, well, if you go with us, we'll give you a $600 rebate. And so then now what's going to happen? Then you're going to then go in and say, well, I still want to work with Matt. So then the company will agree to send it to Matt. But because the company's going to give them a $600 rebate, they'll go ahead and play that game with them.
Right.
So my prediction is that a higher ratio of closings will come with a referral fee. I mean, it's going to be a Zillow, it's going to be a Realtor.com, it's going to be the OpCities, it's going to be the Home Lights, it's going to be the Amazons. They're all getting in that business, right? And I know Home Light recently. If we listen carefully and look carefully, Home Light has their own little iBuyer program. Now they're saying, and Home Light's owned by Google, by the way. You just do your research. Home Light's actually owned by Google, or it was, unless Google recently sold it. But you go in and you start looking at Home Light, start looking at their marketing, and they're saying, we'll buy your property. We'll present your property to 3 of our investors. So when they know that that's what they have to say in order to get an enormous amount of people to opt in. And once they get them opt in, then they refer them out. So let's just say you've got a centers of influence, and they see that, hey, we have 3 investors that'll make an offer on your property, your centers of influence is likely to opt in just out of curiosity, and boom, there triggers the referral fee. And so that's, to me, where the margins are going to shrink fastest and first. Is it's going to shrink because now these companies are inserting themselves into our personal net sheet from gross commission. Then you would have your company split, and then you would have your adjusted gross commission, right? And then you'd have your expenses out of that for net profit. But now you got gross commission, and then you've got them referral fee, and then you've got your company split, and then you have to then take out all your fees. And that split at a minimum is 25%, as upward to 40%. Yeah. That's where the margins shrink.
Okay. Now, if you look at like true businesses, as in more than your solo salesperson or a small team, like the way a business would deal with rising costs of leads is by either, number one, going out and finding other lead sources, cultivating ways to generate leads at lower cost, which we talk about that a lot. That's a bedrock principle of the show. So that's a no-brainer. The other way would be operational efficiencies, which I think that the solo agent or even the small team struggles with that, because we're not seeing, like, unless you're like a true systems builder, it's hard to really, really drive operational efficiencies enough that'll offset a 25% cut in your gross commission. Yeah. So what are some of the things that you look at with your team and with your agents, the ones that are plugged into your system? How do you help them offset the shrinking margins?
Yeah. So you really mentioned some solutions right there. And I think we need to kind of spend a little bit more time on what you just said, because I agree that we need to go ahead and make sure, or listen, an agent can do whatever you want to do. But what I would be suggesting is I'd be suggesting that while you accept lead from somebody else's faucet, that you have got to create a faucet of your own.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to create a faucet of your own. And I'm not saying turn all those lead sources off. I surely won't. But we need to have a balance. You know, I'm a believer, in accepting leads at referral fees and whatnot. But you just got to make sure that you're watching, as you're seeing more of your transactions are coming with a referral fee, then you want to balance that out and increase some of your outbound lead generation strategies to make sure that you're adding some additional deals to the pie, that come at you're netting the most at a higher margin. So I would say you got to still stay old school. I would also say this. I would say, you got to you do have to do some of this marketing on your own. If you're working buyer leads or listing leads and you're used to getting them from another company, then you really figure out, how are they generating these leads? Are they doing social media marketing? What are they doing? And see if you can actually take that stuff in-house and start generating those leads at a lower cost than you're actually having to pay. Because right now we might be saying, oh gosh, I only have to pay $15 a lead from this lead source, or Zillow, I have to pay $100 a lead. Like, we'll be begging them to sell us leads at the price that they're currently willing to sell them for now.
Yes, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, right? Compared to what it's going to cost when it comes out of referral fee.
Yes, that is the true comparison. It's not compared to, we're not trying to beat them on what they can generate the lead for, because we will never out efficiently market a massive tech company that understands and can put legitimate engineers on their Facebook ads. So we can't outbeat them in the spend, but we can outbeat them in the sense that, hey, we're going to do it for cheaper than what you claim you can give us in the referral fee. We're not going to pay 25% to generate that lead. We'll figure out a way to do it cheaper. It's just probably more expensive than what we're used to, which again goes back to the shrinking margin.
Yeah. So at least you can, it's kind of like mitigating the risk here, instead of just like saying, oh, okay, well now everything's going to come and I have to learn how to actually sell real estate with lower margins. I mean, there's some things that you could proactively do. I mean, there's plenty of examples of how people are creating leads for themselves, at lower costs than percentages in a referral fee. And you're going to have to probably stop saying, oh no, I don't do that, or I don't do that. Oh no, that I don't like to spend money on, in that area. Well, you're going to spend money in that area. It's just a matter now is at how much are you going to spend. So it's time to kind of get up and start to kind of take charge of our own marketing and make sure that you're doing it in-house. If you're a team or a brokerage, or if you're an individual agent, you got to bring as much of it as you can in-house. And I'm not saying boycott the other people. I'm saying bring it in-house to keep your margins a little bit more acceptable, to protect your margins. And then the third thing, so one is outbound. You got to go out and create your own leads. Number two is from a marketing standpoint, be careful at just saying, well, I just have this company do it and I just have this company do it, because those companies that are providing leads, they're, in my opinion, they're all trying to get to a paid referral type of model. So whatever you're going after right now, whatever the model is right now, I don't believe that they're all want to stay in that model, because they're going to follow suit. Like even in, I have heard, I have not experienced this, so it is, I will disclose that. But I have heard that in some markets, realtor.com will not sell zip codes and sell leads anymore. That the only way you can get leads in some markets is through their City product, which means they all come at a referral fee. That is something that is going to continue, in my opinion. Zillow is actually testing referral fees, 35% referral fees in multiple markets. They're testing it not just because they've got excess inventory in those markets. They're testing it in those markets because they've got excess inventory and they might as well test in those markets. But as soon as they actually see that this is really brilliant, then they're going to go ahead and probably spread it out and expand that. So everyone's trying to get to the percent. And so we see it coming. Don't just sit back and watch it. Don't argue about it. It's going to happen in spite of you. But go ahead and learn from it and do something about it. And the third thing is this. I think we have to stop taking for granted that our centers of influence love us so much that they're going to be loyal to us forever. Stop taking it for granted. You need to look at your centers of influence like you're actually just starting to date them again, not like you've been married to them for 20 years. See, like, you think about you're in a marriage for 20 years and you forget, God, when's the last time we had a date night, right? But when you're not married yet, you don't ever think when's the last time you had a date night. Hell, you're trying to go out on a date like every other day. We need to start dating our databases again and make our databases fall in love with us very fast. Stop actually treating your database like it's an old relationship that you've had for 20 years, taking it for granted and forgetting to love on them. Because when we stop loving on our database, at the same time that all of our competition is loving on our database, we lose our database. It's just like a relationship. You better start loving on your relationship, because if you don't love on your relationship and somebody's loving on your relationship on that other person, then you're at risk of losing that person. And so I think we've got to go and realize that our databases, we are not guaranteed to get X amount of business out of these databases anymore, because our competition is doing everything they can to love on them and win their attention. So we need to go back in and make sure we are delivering really phenomenal value to our databases in order to insulate ourselves and protect ourselves from these other companies.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. With that in place, let's put it this way, with that in place, a plan to love on your database, taking the referrals to get somebody into your database, which then will turn into a repeat transaction down the road that you have a much higher chance of getting, is not a bad thing necessarily.
No.
Not a bad thing to take a short-term, higher cost to acquire lead, higher cost to acquire a client, because the odds of HomeLight or a service like that doing a great job of loving on your database over time, very slim. They don't have a personality. Now, I don't know. We may disagree on that, but to me, they don't have, most of the tech companies don't have a personality. They don't have something that engenders long-term trust and loyalty there. I mean, the panic right now with all the big brands, if you pay attention to the marketers that work in the big brand world, they're freaking out because there is no loyalty anymore.
Yes.
Right. So they're having the same problem.
let's debate a little bit on this one.
Okay.
Okay. So all they have to do is do this much better than the current real estate agent is doing.
Okay. Fair point.
So they don't have to love on them like you would actually, like you have this vision of like what loving on them would be.
Right.
Like if the agent's loving them at this level, all they got to do is get to this level. So what we have to be aware of, and listen,
it's a low bar to hop over. Yeah,
it's a low bar to hop over.
Yeah.
And that's why these companies are existing today.
Mm-hmm.
It was a low bar to hop over. Like we were terrible at generating leads. So then the technology companies decided they'll actually generate the leads. Yep. And then we're terrible at following up with the leads. So then they actually added concierge services because it wasn't really that hard. So they could just add that on. It's like everything they're doing is stuff that we're supposed to be doing and the consumer demands. And because we were not fulfilling consumer demand, then they actually fulfilled it. And then that's all the love that they have to give to take our clients away. So in order for us to believe that a home light can't love on them as good as an agent, then you're saying you have to believe that the agent's doing a fairly good job.
That was my incorrect assumption. That is true. that was a bridge too far.
Yeah, fantasy land, but that's okay. Exactly. I like to fantasize too.
Oh man, that's funny. Okay, so we obviously have to do a better job. Not even a better job that we're doing now. We have to do a much better job of loving on our database over the long term. Let's talk a little bit about where lead conversion tools like Contact Junkie that you've been working a lot with lately, where that fits in. And I want to go back to the piece that you mentioned where we have a chance to compete with these platforms head on and consider like basically anything up to paying a referral fee on that lead that we would get from them. It's worth it to figure out how we can generate the leads at that price or less so we don't have to take them. Same people, same leads, generating the leads ourselves and then converting them. And I think the thing that we've overlooked, or at least agents have overlooked, that the marketers figured out is that if you can do a better job of loving on the people while they're in the lead conversion process, then it actually lowers your cost of getting that person in to begin with. Yeah. Right. So it lowers your ad costs, lowers all those things spread out over a large group of people. So I think that's where something like a Contact Junkie comes in, as I understand it, is it can lower and it gives us the ability to compete head on with the platforms.
Yeah. So, and I don't know, we got onto this love thing. This should have been what we were talking about the week of Valentine's Day.
Yeah,
week.
Exactly.
This would have been a great podcast for that, but let's go back to loving, loving on our people. One of the best things that we can do to show our love for somebody is to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so the challenge is that we're generating so many leads. It's hard to communicate. It's hard to actually give love to so many people in a short period of time. So we get all these leads coming in. And we got these leads and we try to call them, can't get them on the phone, leave a voicemail. We got another lead. And next, 3 days later, we've got all these leads, and these leads from 3 days ago, we don't have time to call them anymore to try to get them on the phone because we got to focus on the one that just called us, 10 minutes ago, 5 minutes ago, right? And so where Contact Junkie comes in is to make sure that we use an automated system to increase one's bandwidth, an agent's bandwidth. So while we're on the phone right now, I could have Contact Junkie, sending text and emails, et cetera, to a whole group of people that I haven't been able to get on the phone. And then when we get the responses and I get off, then I can go in and start engaging with them. So in this conversation, one of the challenges that we have is we're generating all these leads, and we're not really capitalizing on all of them because we don't have enough time. Yeah. And that actually becomes the reason why our databases seem to be bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. When it comes to buyer databases, the reason why it increases so fast is because we're actually not able to talk to everybody and they just go into this holding bin, but then we never have time to go back to the holding bin to communicate with them because the flow is still continuing. Yeah. And that's the solution that Contact Junkie has. So Contact Junkie just makes sure that when you're getting a volume of leads in, that you're actually getting them to the funnel, getting them in the proper places, setting appointments with significantly more than you would have done without it. Now, from that point on, and let's just say that you're doing transactions with it and you've closed the transaction, now that's where we've got to create sticky scenarios. And I think like a bank, okay? Or I observe banks. Banks are really good at creating a sticky relationship. I have been with Bank of America before it was Bank of America, and before the bank it was before it was Bank of America. I've actually been with Bank of America since I think I was 30 years.
Goodness.
Yeah, it wasn't Bank of America in the beginning.
Right.
I had an account with them for like 30 years.
Okay.
And do I love Bank of America? Not really. Like, I've got a lot of accounts with other banks. Like, I haven't opened up a new account with Bank of America for quite a long time. I mean, like years. So why haven't I moved my account? Because to move the account, I'd have to figure out what my damn password is. And then I'd have to go to the bank and I'd have to like make a withdrawal or talk to somebody. And then I would have to like tell all the people that are on my Bank of America credit card that are auto taking money out for the gym membership and this membership and this membership and this fee and this fee. I'd have to go tell all them that I'm changing the account, and I'd have to go and set it up so the new account would be able to send the money to all those people. And then, I would have to, I'd have to take my kids and say, okay, your little squirrel account, we're going to move the squirrel account, the little Sammy the Saver account to this bank. It's like, I think of all the crap I got to do to move my account, and I'm like, no way. I will die with my Bank of America account. So from a banking standpoint, that's called, they're trying to create a sticky scenario.
Right.
They get so many different prongs in you that the pain of leaving is much greater than the gain of leaving. So we got to ask ourselves that as real estate agents, looking at our clients and past clients and databases, how do we create such a sticky scenario that the pain of leaving us is much greater than the gains that they would get by leaving us? In most cases, they're just a name in a database. They're just a name on a list. So there's not a lot of pain for leaving us.
No.
And there's a lot of gain from going somewhere else. Listen, I'm speaking to myself at the same time I'm speaking to everyone that's listening to this. We better change that fast.
All right. Well, I know we'll have more to say on that in future episodes, because this is what you're constantly thinking about, and I'm interested to see what your perspective is as it evolves, because it's not getting any easier to build relationships that are and sticky scenarios with people. Although technology might be making some of that easier, but it gives us the ability to communicate with a larger group of people, which usually ends up having the reverse effect as we build much shallower relationships with a bigger group of people, which used to make sense, now is making a lot less sense. Okay, so with that being said, what's the best way for people? I'm sure they're going to pepper you with questions. Long, intense questions, paragraphs long questions. What's the best way to reach out and communicate?
Just go to Facebook Messenger and hit me up there. Send me a message. And you know what? I actually enjoy getting messages, and answering them. So I'm happy to do that. It just shows that people are listening and we're getting people to think, because this conversation today, Matt, I hope it gets people to think, because I'm afraid, because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm always afraid. If everything's perfect in the world, I'm always afraid. We always live, entrepreneurs and people that, have big goals, we're always afraid. I hope everyone will admit that. If you've really got big goals, you're probably scared that somebody's after you and somebody's going to try to take you over and whatnot. Yeah, I live that life, but I'm not necessarily afraid of what's going on in the industry, but I'm really, really paying attention and realizing that ultimately I need to be better for the consumer in order to continue to grow. Yeah. And that whole stickiness conversation, you've got to make sure that the pain to leaving you is better than, is more severe than the gain to leaving you. Those things, you really want to take that by heart and think about, how can I up my game in the level of service. And I hated the idea. I thought about it. I didn't even want to say that level of service because everyone's talking about that added value and all this. No, it's stickiness. You've got to make sure that you're really focusing on that, or you could lose. You could really lose a lot.
Yeah. Well said. All right. So reach out on Facebook Messenger for the show itself, guys. If you're listening and you want to listen consistently, make sure to hit subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast, whether it's iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you. Make sure to leave us a review on iTunes. Would be fantastic. If there's a particular guest that you really enjoyed, like we've got the CEO of Century 21 coming up on the show, make sure to leave a review that mentions the guest and thank them for their time and their contribution. So as always, Greg, I know you got to run, so we don't want to keep you. I could go another hour on this, but we'll leave it there, and we'll have to follow this up with another episode. So appreciate your time as always.
Sounds good, buddy. Thank you.